What would you do if someone took the person you love most? Not threatened, not insulted. Took. Bruce Lee sits in the corner booth of Wong's tea house watching his wife Brooklyn Spencer trace calligraphy characters on rice paper with her fingertips. Her movements flow like water, each stroke deliberate, purposeful, beautiful. The afternoon sun filters through paper lanterns, casting golden shadows across her face. She looks up, catches him staring, smiles, that smile that made him forget every fight, every enemy, every reason to build walls around his heart. This is peace. This is home. This is what he fought to protect. Brooklyn teaches traditional Chinese calligraphy at the Jade Mountain Cultural Center. Her students range from curious children to elderly immigrants hungry for connection to their heritage. She moves between them like a gentle current, correcting postures, guiding brushstrokes, speaking in Mandarin and English, sometimes both in the same breath. Bruce admires this about her, how she builds bridges where others see only distance. In the early days of their marriage, he would sit in the back of her classroom, watching her demonstrate the 8 basic strokes, her voice soft but commanding as she explained how each character carries the weight of centuries, how the brush becomes an extension of the artist's soul. The students would lean forward, mesmerized not just by her technique, but by her presence, the way she could make ancient wisdom feel alive, accessible, necessary. Her most prized possession sits in their apartment, locked away in a cedar box, an antique brush set passed down through generations of her family, the handles carved from bamboo, older than the city itself, the bristles still soft, still perfect, still waiting. Brooklyn's grandfather, a master calligrapher in Beijing, had given her the set before the revolution, before the escape, before the long journey to America. The brush carries stories Bruce has never fully understood, but respects completely. The way Brooklyn touches the box with reverence tells him everything he needs to know. The tea house fills with the usual crowd, construction workers ending their shifts, students with textbooks scattered across tables, families sharing dim sum and stories. The familiar hum of conversation in 3 languages creates a cocoon of safety. Mrs. Chun waves from behind the counter. Her husband brings them jasmine tea. Without being asked, they know Bruce and Brooklyn's order by heart, this ritual of belonging in a world that often feels hostile to outsiders. Brooklyn's phone buzzes. She glances at it, frowns, her brush pauses mid-stroke. Something's wrong. Bruce straightens in his seat, his body knows before his mind catches up. 20 years of martial arts training has taught him to read micro-expressions, the tightening around her eyes, the way her shoulders pull inward, the breath that catches. She shows him the message from Ezra Wallace, director of the Cultural Center. Emergency board meeting tonight. Your position is under review. Come alone. Bruce's jaw tightens. Ezra Wallace, with his pressed suits and calculated smiles, has been circling Brooklyn's program for months. Budget cuts, he calls them, though everyone knows the real reason her classes are too successful, too popular, too important to the community for a man who sees culture as commodity. Wallace wants to replace the calligraphy program with something more marketable: corporate team building exercises, wine and paint nights, anything that brings in suburban dollars instead of preserving actual heritage. Brooklyn sets down her brush. The character she was writing remains unfinished. Young eternity interrupted. She stares at the incomplete stroke as if it holds answers to questions she's afraid to ask. Bruce reaches across the table, covers her hand with his. Her skin is stained with ink, evidence of her passion, her dedication, her arting. The silence between them, he can hear her heart beating faster the way it did on their wedding day when she promised to share her world with him. What would you do if you saw the threat coming but couldn't stop it from walking through the door? The bell above the tea house entrance chimes. Heavy footsteps echo across worn wooden floors. Cooper Emerson enters, flanked by 2 men in cheap suits and expensive watches. Cooper runs numbers for the underground fight circuits where Bruce earned his reputation and his scars. They have history, the kind that leaves marks on more than just skin. 3 years ago, Bruce had walked away from that world, the late-night fights in warehouse basements, blood on concrete floors, money that came with invisible change. Thought he was free, thought his past would stay buried beneath layers of peaceful afternoons and quiet love. Cooper slides into the booth, uninvited, unwelcome, dangerous. His eyes find Brooklyn linger too long. Bruce's hands slowly form fists under the table. Cooper's voice carries the weight of unspoken threats. I heard your wife teaches brush painting, beautiful art, fragile, though easy to break. Brooklyn's face remains calm, but Bruce sees her hand tremble slightly as she reaches for her tea. Cooper continues. Ezra Wallace sends his regards, says the cultural center needs new management, someone who understands the value of cooperation. The tea house has gone quiet. Conversations die mid-sentence. Even the elderly men playing Xiangqi stop moving their pieces. Everyone senses the shift in the room's energy the way animals sense an approaching storm. Bruce's voice comes out steady, controlled. My wife's work is not your concern. Cooper laughs, a sound like breaking glass. Everything in this neighborhood is my concern. Your pretty wife teaches and my territory works in. My building breathes my air. He leans forward, his breath smelling of cigarettes and bad decisions. Ezra's got big plans for that cultural center, plans that don't include sentimental Chinese brush painting. Brooklyn stands, her movement graceful despite the fear Bruce can see in her eyes. We should go. Cooper's hand shoots out, grabs her wrist. His grip leaves white marks on her skin. Time stops. The tea house holds its breath. Bruce's vision narrows to a single point. Cooper's hand on his wife's wrist, not anger, not fear, just clarity. What would you do if the line was crossed and there was no going back? Bruce rises slowly, his body moving with the fluid precision of someone who has spent decades learning to channel force exactly where it's needed. Cooper looks up, still holding Brooklyn's wrist, still smiling, that predator's smile. He has no idea what he's just awakened. The teacup shatters against the floor. Brooklyn's fingers lose their hold as Cooper's grip tightens around her delicate wrist. Bruce sees red welts forming under Cooper's thick fingers, sees his wife's face, fighting not to show pain in the corner of the tea house. Old Mr. Lou sets down his newspaper. His weathered hands shake, not from age, but from recognition. He knows what happens next in stories like these. Cooper's voice drops to a whisper meant only for Bruce. 3 years you've been hiding, playing house, pretending you're not who you are, but I remember the warehouse on 5th Street. Remember how you moved like water, like death, like something that shouldn't exist. Bruce breathing remains steady, but his heart pounds a war drum in his chest. He can feel every muscle in his body coiling, waiting, ready. Cooper continues. Ezra Wallace has plans, big plans. The cultural center sits on prime real estate, worth more as condos than as a place for old people to remember dead languages. Brooklyn tries to pull away. Cooper's grip tightens. She winces almost inaudibly, but Bruce hears it the way a father hears his child's cry across a crowded room. The sound cuts through him, sharper than any blade, deeper than any wound he's ever received in 15 years of underground fighting. What would you do if someone hurt the person who taught you how to love? Bruce's voice comes out low and controlled. Let go of my wife. Cooper laughs, but there's something forced about it, something that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Or what? You'll demonstrate some of that ancient Chinese magic? Show me how dangerous you are? The two men flanking Cooper shift their weight, hands moving instinctively toward concealed weapons. They've heard stories about Bruce Lee, stories that sound like legends until you see them proven true. Brooklyn's eyes find Bruce's in them. He sees not fear for herself, but fear for him, fear of what he might become if pushed too far. She knows his history, knows about the underground circuits, knows about the violence he's capable of, has seen the scars across his knuckles, his ribs, his soul. She fell in love with the man who walked away from that world, the man who chose peace over power, love over legacy, art over anger. But Cooper doesn't know about the choice Bruce made, doesn't know about the promise Bruce gave Brooklyn on their wedding night, that his hands would never again be weapons, would only create, protect, heal. The promise that's about to break. Around them, the tea house has become a theater of held breath. Customers pretend to eat, to read, to ignore the drama unfolding in the corner booth, but their attention is laser-focused on the man they know only as Brooklyn's quiet husband, the one who pays his bills, says please and thank you, helps elderly customers with heavy bags. They have no idea who he really is, what he's capable of, what he's done in darker places for darker reasons. Mrs. Chun clutches her dish rag, knuckles white. Her husband reaches slowly for the phone, then stops, realizing that calling police might make things worse for everyone involved. Cooper releases Brooklyn's wrist, stands up, his bulk casting shadows across their table. His voice carries the authority of someone who's never been told no. Wallace wants to meet with you tomorrow night, Jade Mountain Cultural Center, after hours, just you and him, no wife, no witnesses, no complications. He leans down, his face inches from Bruce's. Unless you'd prefer we handle this the old-fashioned way. Bruce rises slowly, his movement fluid, controlled, dangerous. Until this moment, he's been sitting like any other husband in any other tea house, but as he stands, something shifts in his posture, his presence, his very essence. The air in the room seems to thicken. Everyone can feel it the way you feel electricity before lightning strikes. Cooper takes a step back, involuntary, instinctive his body. Recognizing a predator before his mind catches up for a moment, Bruce allows himself to remember what it felt like to be feared, to walk into a room and watch grown men calculate their chances of survival. The power was intoxicating, addictive, destructivates. Why he walked away, why he chose love over legacy, peace over power, Brooklyn over everything else. But watching Cooper touch his wife, hurt his wife, threaten his wife, brings it all back, like muscle memory, like breathing, like death. His voice comes out, steady as granite. Touch her again, and you'll discover why I retired undefeated. The words hang in the air like smoke, like promises, like threats. Cooper's two men exchange glances, hands moving closer to their weapons. They came here expecting to intimidate a cultural center teacher and her quiet husband. They didn't come prepared for this, for him, for the legend they've only heard whispered in underground circles. Cooper tries to laugh, but it comes out wrong, strained, forced, unconvincing. Big words from a man who teaches old ladies how to paint pretty pictures, but his eyes tell a different story. Recognition dawning slowly, like sunrise over a battlefield. He remembers now not just the stories, but the face. Bruce Lee, the ghost of Fifth Street, the man who walked away from $1 million purse and never looked back. The man who could have been champion of the underground, could have ruled the shadow world of illegal fights and blood money. Instead, chose love, chose peace, chose Brooklyn. Cooper's smile falters completely now as he realizes he's not dealing with a civilian, not dealing with a victim, not dealing with someone who will simply roll over and surrender. Is dealing with a weapon that chose to become a man. Before we continue, comment below where you're watching from. Let us know if you've ever had to choose between who you were and who you want to be. The tea house waits in perfect silence for what happens next. The silence stretches like a taut wire ready to snap. Cooper's men shift uncomfortably, hands hovering near weapons they hope they won't need, but suspect they might. Bruce remains perfectly still, a statue carved from patience and barely contained violence. His eyes never leave Cooper's face, reading every micro-expression, every tell, every sign of weakness. This is what made him legendary in the underground circuits, not just his speed, his power, his technique, but his ability to read an opponent's soul through their eyes. Cooper breaks first, takes another step back, his retreat masked as casual movement, but everyone in the tea house can see the fear creeping into his posture. The old man in the corner, Mr. Liu, has lived through wars, has seen men die, has watched empires crumble. He recognizes the moment when violence becomes inevitable. He stands slowly, his newspaper forgotten, and walks toward the back exit. Other customers follow, sensing the shift in the room's energy, like animals fleeing before an earthquake. Within minutes, the tea house empties until only the essential players remain. Bruce and Brooklyn. Cooper and his men. Mrs. Chin behind the counter, clutching her phone, but afraid to use it. Her husband, Nolan Sullivan, the quiet man who makes the best dumplings in Chinatown, steps closer to his wife. His eyes never leave the confrontation unfolding in front of them. He knows Bruce Lee's reputation, has heard the stories whispered in kitchen corners and late-night conversations. The ghost of Fifth Street, the man who could end a fight with one blow, but chose instead to walk away. Nolan respects that choice, understands the weight of carrying power you'd rather not use. He carries his own secrets, his own reasons for choosing peace over violence. Cooper's confidence cracks like old paint as he realizes he's miscalculated. This isn't intimidation, this is escalation. And he's no longer in control. Brooklyn steps closer to Bruce, her hand finding his arm. Her touch is gentle, but her message is clear. Don't let me be the reason you become something you've worked so hard to leave behind. Bruce feels her fingers against his skin, feels the trust in her touch, the faith she has that he'll choose the right path, even when there is no right path. Cooper's voice comes out more aggressive now, desperation masked as dominance. You think you're tough because you beat up a few drunks in warehouses? This is real business, real money, real consequences. He gestures toward his men. My associates here handle problems permanently. No honor codes, no referee, no rules. The larger of Cooper's men, Addison Green, steps forward. His suit jacket bulges with concealed weapons. His face carries scars from fights that weren't honor duels, but survival battles. Addison's voice sounds like gravel in a cement mixer. We know about your wife's little art classes, know the old people who come to learn about their heritage, know the children who practice after school. The threat hangs in the air like poison. Bruce's jaw tightens, his hands form fists, then force themselves to relax. His breathing deepens, centering himself the way His masters taught him, but Brooklyn hears the implied violence against her students, her elderly immigrants desperately trying to maintain connection to their homeland, the children whose parents work 3 jobs to afford art supplies. Her voice comes out steady despite the fear. You leave them alone, they have nothing to do with whatever this is about. Cooper laughs, but it's hollow, echoing in the nearly empty tea house. Everything is connected, sweetheart, your husband's reputation, your art classes. Wallace's development plans, my business interests. He leans back against the neighboring table, trying to project casualness, but his eyes dart constantly toward the exit, his instincts screaming that he's made a mistake coming here, confronting this man in his own territory. The second man, Sienna Tate, younger, but no less dangerous, reaches inside her jacket, her movement slow, deliberate, threatening. Bruce's body responds before his mind can intervene, 20 years of training compressed into one fluid motion. His hand shoots out, catches Sienna's wrist before her weapon clears leather. The pressure point he applies sends electric pain up her arm. She gasps, drops to one knee, her hand going numb, weapon clattering to the floor. The movement is so fast, so precise, so seemingly effortless that for a moment everyone stops breathing. This is what legends are made of, not the flashy moves in movies, but the quiet precision of a master who knows exactly how much force to apply, where, when. Why? Addison reaches for his gun, but Bruce is already moving. His elbow finds the pressure point in Addison's neck. The big man crumples like wet paper, unconscious before he hits the floor. The entire confrontation lasts less than 3 seconds. 2 trained killers neutralized without injury, without permanent damage, with surgical precision. Cooper stares, mouth open, finally understanding who he's dealing with. Not just a reputation, not just stories, but the living embodiment of everything he's heard whispered in dark corners about the man who walked away. Bruce straightens, his breathing still calm, his expression unchanged, as if nothing happened, but his eyes burn with controlled fury as he looks at Cooper. His voice comes out soft as silk, sharp as steel. Your associates need medical attention, not urgent. But soon Cooper looks down at his unconscious men, then back at Bruce, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He tries to speak, but no words come, his throat constricted by the sudden realization that he's completely outmatched, outclassed, out of his league. Brooklyn watches her husband with a mixture of awe and sadness. Awe at his skill, his control, his protection; sadness at the necessity of it all. She knows this moment changes everything. The peaceful life they've built together, the quiet anonymity he's worked so hard to maintain, the promise they made each other, all shattered in 3 seconds of perfect violence. What would you do if protecting what you love meant destroying who you've become? Cooper finally finds his voice. This isn't over. Wallace still wants to meet tomorrow night, or there will be consequences, but his words carry no weight now, no threat, no power, just the desperate bluster of a man who has lost control of his own game. Bruce steps closer, his presence filling the space between them. His voice drops to a whisper. Tell Wallace I'll be there, but if anything happens to my wife, if anyone else comes near her, if so much as one hair on her head is disturbed. He pauses, lets the weight of his words settle like dust after an explosion. I'll remember why they used to call me the Ghost. Cooper stumbles toward the exit, half carrying Sienna, half dragging Addison, his empire of intimidation crumbling like ancient paper in the face of true power. The tea house door slams shut behind them, leaving only the echo of their retreat and the weight of what just happened. Brooklyn stands frozen, watching her husband as if seeing him for the first time, the gentle man who brings her tea every morning, who listens to her stories about difficult students, who holds her hand during movies. This same man just dismantled 2 killers like they were children playing dress-up with toy weapons. Mrs. Chin finally moves behind the counter, her hands shaking as she begins cleaning teacups that don't need cleaning, busy work to process what she's witnessed. Her husband Nolan approaches slowly, his eyes respectful, but wary. He's seen violence before. In his homeland, before America, before peace, before choices. His voice comes out soft and careful. Mr. Lee, perhaps you should take your wife home. The neighborhood has eyes, has tongues, has memories. Bruce nods, understanding the wisdom in those words. What happened here will spread like ripples in still water, growing larger, more distorted, more dangerous. With each telling, he takes Brooklyn's hand, finds it cold, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from shock, from the collision of 2 worlds she thought could remain separate. They walk home in silence through streets that feel different now, more hostile. More watched, more uncertain. Their apartment building stands unchanged, red brick and fire escapes, laundry hanging from windows, children's voices echoing in courtyards. But Bruce sees everything differently. Now potential threats, escape routes, vulnerable. Approaches, sight lines, the warrior's eye he'd worked so hard to close, opening again against his will inside their apartment. Brooklyn sets down her purse, removes her jacket, moves through familiar routines with mechanical precision, her mind elsewhere. Processing, analyzing, grieving. Bruce watches her, knowing that something precious has been lost today, something they can't get back. The illusion of safety, the myth of normal, the dream that love could be enough to keep the darkness at bay. She stops at the cedar box on their bookshelf, runs her fingers along its surface, the antique brush set from her grandfather, sleeping inside, like a secret waiting to be told. Her voice comes out barely above a whisper. They know about my students, the children. The elderly ones who trust me to keep their culture alive. Bruce moves closer, wants to comfort her, but feels the distance growing between them, not physical distance, but something deeper, something that 3 seconds of violence has carved into their relationship. Brooklyn turns to face him, her eyes carrying questions she's afraid to ask. How many people have you hurt? How many lives have you changed with those hands? The questions hang in the air like smoke from a fire neither of them wanted. To start, Bruce looks down at his hands, sees the calluses from years of training, the small scars from underground fights, the wedding ring that represents everything he chose over his former life. His voice comes out raw with honesty. Too many, not enough. I don't know anymore. She sits on their couch, the one they picked out together at a secondhand store, arguing playfully about colors and comfort and whether it would fit through their narrow door. Such simple concerns from a different lifetime. When their biggest problem was whether to hang the calligraphy scroll on the north wall or the south. Brooklyn's voice carries the weight of 1,000 unasked questions. Tell me about Wallace. What does he really want? Why is Cooper involved? What aren't you telling me? Bruce sits beside her, but maintains distance, respecting the space she needs to process, to understand, to decide what comes next. His explanation comes out in careful pieces, like a confession to a priest. Wallace wants the building. The cultural center sits on 3 acres of prime downtown real estate worth millions as luxury condos worth nothing, as a place for immigrants to remember home. Cooper runs enforcement for the development consortium, threats, intimidation, violence. Whatever it takes to clear property for gentrification. The neighborhood has been fighting for 2 years to save the center, legal battles, community organizing, peaceful protests, all failing against money and political connections. Wallace thought intimidating one teacher would be easy, didn't know about Bruce's past, about what he's capable of, about the choice he made to protect what matters. Brooklyn processes this information, her mind connecting dots she'd rather not see. So this was never about budget cuts, never about efficiency, never about serving the community better. Bruce shakes his head. It's about profit. It's always about profit. Your program threatens nothing except their timeline, but they need you gone to justify closing the whole center. She stands, walks to the window, looks down at the street where Cooper's car disappeared, where her students walk every Tuesday and Thursday to learn about heritage and identity and belonging. Her reflection in the glass shows a woman aging in real time, gaining years and minutes as the weight of responsibility settles on her shoulders. Behind her, Bruce waits, knowing that whatever she decides will determine not just their future, but who they become in the aftermath of this moment. Brooklyn's voice comes out stronger now, decision crystallizing like water becoming ice. My grandfather's brush set, he carried it through war, through revolution, through the journey to America. She turns to face Bruce. He told me some things are worth fighting for, some traditions are worth preserving at any cost. Her eyes meet his, and for the first time since the tea house, he sees his wife, not the frightened woman she became, but the fierce protector of culture and community. He fell in love with Brooklyn. Continues. Those children who come to my classes, they're not just learning calligraphy, they're learning who they are, where they come from, why they matter. She moves to the cedar box, opens it slowly, revealing the ancient brushes, ivory handles carved with symbols older than America itself. Her fingers trace the intricate designs as she speaks. My grandfather said these brushes hold the memory of every character ever written with them, every poem, every letter, every prayer. She looks at Bruce, her decision made. Tomorrow night, I'm going with you to meet Wallace. Bruce starts to protest, but she cuts him off. Not because I need your protection, but because you need mine. What would you do if the person you love chose to walk into danger beside you instead of away from it? Outside their window, the neighborhood settles into evening routines, families gathering for dinner, children finishing homework, elders sharing stories on stoops and benches, all of it hanging in the balance of what happens. Next, all of it depending on choices made by people who never asked to be heroes, but sometimes heroism isn't a choice, it's simply what love looks like when everything else has been stripped away. The morning arrives gray and heavy with unspoken promises. Of violence, Bruce rises before dawn, as he has every day for 20 years, muscle memory from training regimens that carved discipline into his bones, but today feels different, charged with electricity that makes his skin tingle with anticipation. Brooklyn sleeps fitfully beside him, her dreams troubled by visions of threats she can't quite name, can't quite escape. He watches her for a long moment, memorizing the curve of her shoulder, the way morning light catches in her hair, the peaceful expression that won't survive what's coming. In the kitchen, he makes tea, the ritual grounding him, centering his focus, preparing his mind for what must be done. The newspaper headline screams about development and progress and the bright future awaiting downtown. Nothing about cultural centers, nothing about displaced communities, nothing about the human cost of gentrification. At exactly 7:30, the doorbell rings. Bruce opens it to find Ivy Chandler standing in the hallway, her face grave, her usual composure cracked with worry. Ivy runs the community center next to Brooklyn's school, has worked alongside Brooklyn for 3 years, organizing cultural events, supporting immigrant families, building bridges between old and new. Her voice comes out rushed and breathless. Bruce, something's happened at the cultural center. You need to see this. Brooklyn appears behind him, pulling on her jacket, her face already showing the kind of determination that makes dictators nervous. The three of them walk quickly through morning streets, past vendors setting up fruit stands, past children heading to school, past the ordinary rhythms of a neighborhood that doesn't know it's about to disappear. The Jade Mountain Cultural Center sits on the corner like a fortress of memory, red doors carved with dragons, windows that have watched 3 generations of immigrants find their way home. But something's wrong. The front door hangs open, splintered wood scattered on concrete, glass from broken windows catches morning sunlight like fallen stars. Brooklyn's intake of breath sharp as a blade cuts through Bruce's composure. This isn't random vandalism. This is warfare. Inside, the damage is surgical, precise, deliberately cruel. Display cases smashed, but only the ones containing cultural artifacts, chairs overturned, but only in the classroom where Brooklyn teaches. Her desk sits untouched, except for one thing, a single photograph, torn in half, the image of her and her students at last month's calligraphy exhibition. The message is clear, personal, threatening. Brooklyn picks up the torn photograph, her hands trembling with rage more than fear. These are her children in the image: 8-year-old Tate Cooper, whose grandmother brings him every week; 12-year-old Sienna Addison, who dreams of visiting her family's village in China. All of them now targets in a war they don't understand, against people who see culture as commodity. Ivy walks through the destruction, cataloging damage with professional detachment that barely masks her fury. They knew exactly what to break, what to leave alone. This wasn't random. She stops at Brooklyn's storage closet, the door forced open, supplies scattered, but nothing stolen, just destruction for destruction's sake. Bruce examines the break-in with tactical eyes, multiple entry points, coordinated timing, professional work designed to send a message, not steal anything. But if something doesn't fit the pattern, in the corner of Brooklyn's classroom, an old filing cabinet sits slightly askew, as if someone searched it hastily, desperately. Bruce approaches, opens each drawer, finds them mostly empty except the bottom one, which contains Brooklyn's personal items, teaching certificates, award letters, family photographs. But buried beneath everything else, wrapped in silk cloth, something unexpected: leather portfolio, thick with documents, yellowed with age, tied with red ribbon. Brooklyn gasps, seeing it, recognizing something she thought was lost, something she'd forgotten even existed. Her voice comes out as a whisper: "My grandfather's papers, I thought they were destroyed when we fled Beijing. How did they get here?" Bruce unties the ribbon carefully, reverently. The documents inside are written in traditional Chinese characters, some in ink that's faded but readable, others in pencil still sharp and clear. Ivy leans closer, her eyes widening as she recognizes what they're looking at. These are property deeds, original land grants from before the revolution. Brooklyn's voice carries wonder and growing understanding. My grandfather owned land in Beijing before the communists. Before everything changed. She points to one document in particular. This says he donated 3 properties to the Chinese Cultural Foundation in 1947. Just before we left, Bruce studies the documents, his mind racing, connecting pieces of a puzzle he didn't know existed. The papers detail not just land ownership, but also cultural artifacts donated to preserve Chinese heritage in America, including a collection of master calligraphy works and ancient brush sets valued at millions in today's market. Ivy's voice cuts through their amazement. Do you understand what this means? If these documents are authentic, Brooklyn's family has legitimate claim to cultural artifacts worth more money than Wallace's entire development project. The implications hit Bruce like physical blows. This isn't just about the cultural center. This isn't just about gentrification. This is about generational wealth hidden in plain sight. For 70 years, Wallace didn't just want to intimidate Brooklyn. He wanted these papers, wanted to destroy them before anyone discovered what they contained. But he miscalculated, underestimated the break-in team, who searched hastily, missed the documents hidden in the bottom drawer. Brooklyn sinks into a chair, the weight of discovery overwhelming. All this time, I thought we had nothing, thought we were just fighting to preserve culture and community. Her voice grows stronger. But we're fighting for something much bigger, something that could change everything for every immigrant family in this neighborhood. Bruce looks at the papers, then at his wife, then at Ivy, seeing the shift in their expressions from despair to determination to something approaching hope. But he also sees the danger. These documents make Brooklyn not just a target, but a prize worth killing. For Ivy's phone buzzes. She glances at it, her face paling. Wallace moved up the meeting tonight, became this afternoon 2 o'clock at the Cultural Center. She looks at Bruce. He's not just threatening anymore, he's desperate, and desperate people make fatal mistakes. Brooklyn stands clutching the documents to her chest. Then we meet him, but not as victims, not as people begging for mercy. Her eyes find Bruce's. We meet him as equals, with grandfather's papers, with grandfather's legacy, with grandfather's strength. Outside, storm clouds gather over the neighborhood, the kind of darkness that comes before either destruction or cleansing. What would you do if you discovered that everything you thought you knew about your history was wrong? If the fight you thought was about survival was actually about justice? The documents rest between them like a bridge connecting past to present, memory to possibility, heritage to hope. But bridges can be burned, and some people will do anything to keep the past buried where it can't threaten their future. 2 o'clock arrives like a death sentence. The Cultural Center stands waiting, doors repaired hastily, windows boarded, but the spirit inside wounded and bleeding. Brooklyn walks through familiar hallways carrying her grandfather's papers in a manila envelope, the weight of 70 years of hidden truth heavy in her hands. Bruce follows 3 steps behind, close enough to protect, far enough to let her lead this confrontation his way. Ivy remains outside, calling lawyers, calling journalists, calling anyone who might document what happens in the next hour. The main auditorium has been transformed from a place of learning to a stage for intimidation. Ezra Wallace sits behind a folding table like a judge pronouncing sentence, his expensive suit sharp as a blade, his smile cold as winter morning. Cooper stands to his right, flanked by 6 men, this time not taking chances, not underestimating the quiet teacher and her dangerous husband. But something's different in Cooper's posture. The swagger is gone, replaced by professional wariness, the kind of respect predators show other predators. Wallace voice echoes in the empty room. Mrs. Spencer, Mr. Lee, thank you for coming. I trust yesterday's unpleasantness clarified our position. Brooklyn steps forward, her movement graceful despite the fear Bruce can see in the set of her shoulders. Her voice carries the authority of someone who has discovered their power. Mr. Wallace, before we discuss your position, perhaps you'd like to see something. She places the envelope on the table between them like a chess piece, moving into position. Wallace eyes narrow, slightly suspicion creeping across his features. What is this? Brooklyn opens the envelope slowly, deliberately, letting anticipation build like pressure in a steam engine. The documents spread across the table like fallen leaves, each page carrying the weight of history, the promise of justice, the threat of revelation. Wallace's face changes as he reads, pale skin becoming paler, confident smile cracking, then disappearing entirely. His voice comes out strangled. Where did you get these? Brooklyn's smile carries the satisfaction of a hunter who has finally cornered their prey. From my grandfather's collection hidden in the Cultural Center you so thoughtfully broke into last night. Cooper steps closer, his eyes scanning the documents, his mouth opening, then closing as the implications sink in. Bruce watches. The power dynamics shift like sand in an hourglass. Wallace no longer the predator, but potential prey. The documents detail not just property ownership, but cultural artifacts currently housed in the basement of the Cultural Center. Scrolls and paintings, brush sets and sculptures worth more money than Wallace's entire development project, but more importantly, they establish legal precedent for cultural preservation laws that would prevent any development on the land for the next century. Wallace tries to speak, but Brooklyn continues. My grandfather donated these items to preserve Chinese heritage in America. The legal language is quite specific about their protection. She points to one document. This deed establishes the cultural center as a protected site. Any attempt to destroy or develop the property constitutes theft of cultural patrimony. Cooper's hand moves toward his weapon, but Bruce's voice cuts through the tension like a blade. I wouldn't. The words carry the weight of promise and threat. Cooper's hand freezes, remembering yesterday's lesson and humility. Wallace's composure crumbles completely, his voice rising to a near shout. These documents are 70 years old, meaningless in today's legal climate. No court would honor claims from before the People's Republic. Brooklyn's smile widens. Perhaps, but the journalists gathering outside might find them interesting. The historians, the legal scholars, the immigration advocates. She pauses, letting the words sink in. The story of Chinese cultural artifacts hidden for decades while developers try to steal them. Wallace stands his chair, scraping against wooden floors, his face flushed with rage and panic. You have no idea what you're threatening. The money involved, the people who have invested in this project. His voice drops to a menacing whisper. People who don't accept defeat gracefully, people who solve problems permanently. Cooper nods almost imperceptibly to his men. They begin spreading out, surrounding Bruce and Brooklyn, cutting off escape routes. But Bruce doesn't move, doesn't prepare for violence. Instead, he speaks in a voice calm as still water. Mr. Wallace, I believe you misunderstand the situation. He steps closer to the table, his movement fluid, controlled, dangerous. You see, these documents aren't just about the cultural center, they're about every property my wife's family donated. His voice grows quieter, more menacing. Properties throughout the city, properties your development company has been acquiring through intimidation and illegal pressure. Wallace's eyes widen as he realizes the scope of his exposure. That's impossible. We've researched every property, every legal claim. Brooklyn's voice carries the satisfaction of checkmate. You researched what you could find, not what was hidden, not what was protected by families who learned to keep secrets during times of war. She points to another document. This property on Mason Street where you evicted the Chun family last month, and another. This one on Stockton Street where you demolished the community garden last year. Each revelation hits Wallace like a physical blow, his empire of intimidation crumbling as he realizes every development project for the past 5 years violates federal laws protecting cultural sites. Cooper's men look uncertain, now understanding that violence won't solve this problem, that killing Brooklyn and Bruce won't make the documents disappear, won't silence the lawyers already reviewing copies, won't stop the investigation already beginning. Wallace's voice cracks with desperation. What do you want? Money? We can negotiate, we can find a compromise. Brooklyn stands, her movement regal, imperious, powerful. We want what my grandfather wanted, preservation, protection, justice. She gathers the documents carefully, reverently. And we want you gone from our neighborhood, from our community, from our lives. Her voice rises, filling the auditorium with the authority of generations. These documents go public tomorrow morning unless you withdraw every development project in Chinatown. Wallace tries one last threat. You can't prove authenticity, can't verify the signatures, can't establish legitimate ownership. Bruce's voice cuts through Wallace's desperation like a sword through silk. The brush set in our apartment carries the same signature seals as these documents. His smile predatory, final, authenticated yesterday by 3 independent experts, verified, documented, legally binding. The silence that follows carries the weight of empire falling. What would you do if 70 years of hidden truth finally demanded justice? Outside, storm clouds break open, rain beginning to fall like tears of relief. Wallace's desperation fills the auditorium like toxic smoke. His voice cracks with the sound of a man watching his empire crumble. You think documents will save you? You think lawyers will protect you? You think the system cares about your sentimental Chinese heritage? Cooper shifts his weight, hand moving closer to his weapon. The 6 men spread wider, forming a circle of implied violence. But something has changed in Brooklyn's posture. She stands Straighter speaks clearer moves with the confidence of someone who has discovered their power. Her voice carries the authority of generations. Mr. Wallace, you seem to misunderstand what's happening here. She reaches into her purse, pulls out her phone, shows him the screen. The documents were photographed and uploaded to 3 news outlets, 2 law firms, and the Federal Bureau of Cultural Affairs. At 9 this morning, Wallace's face goes from pale to white to gray, the color of ash. After Fire Brooklyn continues. The story breaks in tomorrow's morning edition. Unless you sign this agreement, she produces another document, crisp and legal, prepared by lawyers who work weekends when justice demands it. Complete withdrawal from all Chinatown properties, full restitution to displaced families, permanent protection status for the Cultural Center. Wallace stares at the agreement, his hands shaking. As he reads terms that will cost him millions in losses, decades of work, his entire reputation, his voice comes out as a hiss. You're destroying years of investment, hundreds of jobs, economic development that could transform this neighborhood. Brooklyn's smile carries no warmth. Into what? Luxury condos that no one from this community can afford. She gestures toward the windows. Starbucks and boutiques where families have run corner stores for 3 generations. Her voice rises with passion and fury. You call it development, we call it cultural genocide. Cooper makes his decision, his hand closing around his weapon, his movement sudden, violent, final. But Bruce is faster, has been watching, waiting, calculating for exactly this moment. His body moves like water, finding the path of least resistance, but maximum impact. 1 step forward, 1 precise strike. To Cooper's wrist, the gun flies across the room, clatters against concrete walls. Cooper's face contorts with pain and surprise as he realizes he's holding a shattered wrist instead of a weapon. The 6 men freeze, understanding in that instant why Bruce Lee became a legend in underground circles, why fighters whispered his name with respect and fear and something approaching reverence. Bruce's voice comes out calm, conversational, as if discussing the weather. Gentlemen, I suggest you reconsider your employment options. His eyes find each of them individually. Violence against innocent people rarely ends well for anyone involved. One by one, they step back, hands raised, showing empty palms, the smart ones among them recognizing that some fights can't be won. Cooper cradles his broken wrist, his face twisted with pain and rage. This isn't over. You can't watch her forever, can't protect everyone she loves every moment of every day. Bruce's expression doesn't change, but the temperature in the room seems to drop 10 degrees. Mr. Cooper, you're right. I can't protect everyone everywhere all the time. He takes a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carries to every corner of the auditorium. But I can protect her, and if anything happens to my wife, if anyone touches her, threatens her, frightens her, even looks at her wrong. He pauses, letting the words settle like snow on a grave. I will find you. I will remember every lesson I learned in those warehouses, every technique I swore never to use again. His voice becomes softer, more dangerous. And I will show you why they called me the ghost, why grown men cross streets to avoid walking past me, why fighters retired rather than face me in the ring. The silence that follows carries the weight of absolute certainty, the kind of promise that changes the fundamental calculation of risk versus reward. Wallace's hands shake as he picks up the agreement, his signature scrawled like a death warrant on his own ambitions. But as he signs, something shifts in his expression, a cunning that speaks of other plans, other strategies, other ways to win. He stands, his composure partially recovered. Congratulations, Mrs. Spencer, you've won this battle. But his smile carries poison. However, legal documents take time to process, bureaucracies move slowly, accidents happen frequently in construction zones. He turns toward the exit, his men following, Cooper stumbling behind them, cradling his wrist. But at the door, Wallace pauses, turns back. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. These old buildings are so fragile, so prone to fires, to collapses, to tragic accidents that claim entire families. The threat hangs in the air like smoke from a slow-burning fuse. Bruce moves before thought, before calculation, before wisdom can intervene. 3 steps across the auditorium, 1 fluid motion that catches Wallace by the throat, lifting him off his feet, not choking, not killing, just demonstrating the absolute ease with which he could do both. Bruce's voice comes out calm as still water, deadly as poison. Mr. Wallace, let me be perfectly clear. Wallace's feet dangle 6 inches off the ground, his expensive shoes worth more than most people's monthly rent kicking uselessly at empty air. Bruce continues. If so much as a light bulb burns out in my wife's classroom, If a single tile falls from the cultural center's roof, if anyone Brooklyn loves suffers so much as a paper cut, he brings Wallace's face closer to his own. I will consider it a personal attack requiring a personal response. He sets Wallace down gently. Almost carefully, like placing a fragile vase on a high shelf, Wallace stumbles backward. His throat bruised, his pride shattered, his confidence evaporated, but his eyes burn with the kind of hatred that outlasts legal documents, outlasts agreements. Outlast reason. What would you do if you knew that winning one battle might have just started a war? The storm outside grows stronger, rain lashing against windows, thunder rolling across the city like the sound of approaching artillery, and in the silence of the auditorium, Brooklyn and Bruce stand together, victorious, but not safe, never safe, as long as hatred has money and power and the patience to wait for revenge. The auditorium empties like a battlefield after the last shot. Wallace and his men retreat into the storm, leaving only the echo of threats and broken promises. Brooklyn stands in the sudden silence, her hands trembling not with fear, but with the aftershock of adrenaline, of victory, of surviving something she never thought she'd have to face. Bruce moves to her side, checks for injuries that aren't physical wounds that don't bleed, but cut deeper than any blade. Her voice comes out steady despite everything. Is it over? Bruce's eyes remain fixed on the doors where Wallace disappeared. The immediate threat, yes, but men like Wallace don't accept defeat. They regroup, reorganize, return. 3 weeks pass, like held breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop for Wallace's revenge to manifest in fire or violence or legal warfare, but instead something unexpected happens. The story breaks bigger than anyone anticipated. Front page news about cultural artifacts hidden for decades, about developers stealing heritage, about one woman's fight to preserve history. Brooklyn's phone rings constantly. Historians, museum curators, legal scholars, immigration advocates, all wanting to hear the story, to see the documents, to understand how one family's courage preserved treasures thought lost forever. The cultural center becomes a pilgrimage site. Families arrive from across the country, carrying their own hidden documents, their own secret histories, their own proof of heritage denied but not destroyed. Mrs. Chun brings photographs from her grandmother's shop in San Francisco before the earthquake, before the fire, before everything burned. Mr. Liu carries his father's immigration papers stamped with seals that prove citizenship denied for generations by laws designed to exclude rather than include. Each story adds weight to Brooklyn's case, creates a tapestry of injustice too large, too documented, too public to ignore. Ivy Chandler works 18-hour days coordinating lawyers, organizing press conferences, building a coalition of communities that stretches from Chinatown to Little Italy to the Mission District. Every neighborhood that's ever faced the bulldozer of gentrification, every family that's ever been told their history doesn't matter. The legal team grows from 2 lawyers to 20 working pro bono because some cases demand justice over profit. Wallace Development Company hemorrhages, investors, stock prices plummet, partners withdraw, projects across the city grind to a halt as investigators dig deeper into decades of questionable acquisitions. Cooper disappears entirely, some say, to Mexico, others whisper about hospitals and reconstructive surgery for a wrist that healed wrong and a pride that may never recover. But the real victory happens quietly on a Tuesday morning when Brooklyn returns to teaching. Her classroom has been restored better than before. Display cases filled with artifacts donated by families who kept them hidden for 70 years. Children arrive, as they always have, backpacks heavy with homework and dreams, but now they carry something else, pride and heritage that's been validated, proven valuable, legally protected. 8-year-old Tate Cooper, no relation to the man who threatened his teacher, holds up a brush almost as big as his small hand. Mrs. Spencer, will you teach me to write my name in Chinese? Brooklyn kneels beside his desk, guides his fingers around the brush handle, shows him how to hold it, like holding a bird, firm enough to control, gentle enough not to hurt. Her voice carries the satisfaction of someone who has fought for something worth preserving. In Chinese calligraphy, every stroke carries meaning, every character tells a story. Your name written in Chinese connects you to thousands of years of culture, of history, of people who looked like you and dreamed dreams like yours. As the children practice their characters, Brooklyn walks between their desks, correcting postures, encouraging efforts, building bridges between past and future. Through the window she can see construction crews working on the building next door, But instead of tearing down, they're building up affordable housing for families who work in the neighborhood, cultural spaces for community gatherings, gardens where children can learn to grow food their grandparents would recognize. The mayor arrives unannounced on a Thursday afternoon, camera crews following behind. As he announces new protections for cultural sites throughout the city, he speaks about heritage and preservation, about the importance of diversity in economic development, words that sound suspiciously similar to Brooklyn's testimony at city council meetings. But Brooklyn doesn't attend the press conference, doesn't pose for photographs, doesn't claim credit for victories that belong to entire communities. Instead, she teaches, as she always has, showing children how to transform blank paper into art, into meaning, into connection with ancestors they've never met, but whose blood runs in their veins. That evening, Bruce finds her in their apartment, sitting at the kitchen table with her grandfather's brush set spread before her like tools of creation. She's writing characters he doesn't recognize, ancient forms that predate modern simplification. Her voice comes out soft with wonder. I found more documents hidden in the brush box, letters from my grandfather to my grandmother, love letters from before the war. She shows him delicate rice paper covered with characters that flow like water. He wrote about hope, about preserving beauty in dark times, about carrying culture across oceans so their children's children would know who they were. Bruce reads over her shoulder, his Mandarin rusty but functional. He knew this day would come, knew someone would try to take what he protected, knew his granddaughter would have to fight for what he saved. The last letter contains a prophecy disguised as blessing. When the dragons return to threaten our treasures, a granddaughter will rise with the strength of mountains, the wisdom of water, the courage of those who crossed impossible oceans, carrying impossible dreams. Brooklyn sets down the letter, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He knew, somehow he knew, outside their window the neighborhood settles into evening, families gathering around dinner tables, children finishing homework under kitchen lights, elders sharing stories on stoops and street corners, all of it preserved, protected, continuing, because one woman found documents in a filing cabinet, because one man remembered how to fight for what matters, because love proved stronger than greed. The cultural center glows with warm light through repaired windows, classes in session, heritage being passed from generation to generation like precious gifts that gain value when shared rather than hoarded. What would you do if you discovered that preserving the past was the key to building a future worth living in? Thunder rolls across the city, but this time it sounds like applause. 6 months later, the question returns, what would you do if someone took the person you love most? But now the answer has changed, evolved, deepened. Bruce Lee sits in the same corner booth at Wong's tea house, watching his wife trace calligraphy characters on rice paper with her fingertips, but everything is different now. The tea house bustles with new energy. Tour groups stop to hear the story of the woman who saved Chinatown with 70-year-old documents and unshakable courage. Brooklyn's students have tripled. Children and adults from across the city come to learn not just calligraphy, but heritage, identity, the art of preserving culture in hostile times. The walls display a new addition, a glass case containing her grandfather's original brush set donated by Brooklyn to inspire future generations. The brass plaque reads, "In memory of Master Chen Wei, who carried hope across oceans and taught us that some things are worth fighting for." Below it, photographs of the cultural center before and after the battle, showing not just restoration, but transformation. New programs, language classes, art workshops, community gardens, legal aid clinics, all thriving in spaces that Wallace wanted to demolish. Bruce watches his wife move between students. Her confidence, different now, earned through fire and struggle, tempered by victory and wisdom. She pauses at a table where elderly Mrs. Liu practices characters with shaking hands, her voice gentle, encouraging. The stroke that trembles carries more meaning than the one that flows easily. Your grandfather's strength lives in your uncertainty. At another table, young Tate Cooper, now 9 years old, writes his name in Chinese characters with growing skill, his brushstrokes confident, purposeful, connected to heritage. He almost lost. Brooklyn catches Bruce watching, smiles, that same smile that made him forget every fight, every enemy, every reason to build walls around his heart. But now it carries something additional, the satisfaction of someone who fought for love and won. The afternoon sun filters through paper lanterns, casting golden shadows exactly as it did 6 months ago. But the light seems brighter, warmer, more permanent. Cooper never returned. Wallace's company declared bankruptcy. The development consortium dissolved, scattered to other cities, other projects, other communities to exploit some threats when faced directly. With courage and truth simply evaporate like morning mist before sunlight. Bruce's phone buzzes, a text message from Ivy Chandler. City Council unanimous vote, Jade Mountain designated permanent cultural landmark, no development ever. He shows Brooklyn. The message, her smile widens, but she doesn't stop teaching, doesn't interrupt the flow of learning happening around her. This is victory, not the dramatic moment of confrontation, not the signing of agreements under duress, not the threats neutralized with precision violence, but this quiet continuation. Culture preserved, children learning, elders sharing, community thriving, heritage flowing from generation to generation like a river that refuses to be dammed. On the wall behind Brooklyn's teaching station, a new mural has appeared, painted by neighborhood artists, depicting the story of preservation and resistance. At its center, a woman holding documents in one hand, a brush in the other, standing firm against forces of destruction, her face determined, peaceful, unbreakable. Beside her, a figure in shadow, protective, ready, but not dominant, supporting, without controlling, loving, without possessing. The mural tells their story, without names, without specifics, but everyone who sees it understands the message. Love, when tested, becomes stronger. Heritage, when threatened, becomes precious. Community, when united, becomes unstoppable. Bruce rises from his seat, walks to Brooklyn's table, places his hand gently on her shoulder. She looks up, covers his hand with hers. Her fingers still stained with ink, still creating, still teaching, still building bridges where others see only distance. Their eyes meet, carrying conversations only they can understand, questions answered, promises kept, futures secured through choice over circumstance. What would you do if someone took the person you love most? The answer echoes through the tea house, through the neighborhood, through the city, through time. You fight not with anger, not with hatred, not with violence as first resort, but with truth, with community, with love that refuses to surrender to fear. You fight with the strength of ancestors who crossed impossible oceans carrying impossible dreams. You fight with the wisdom of those who know that some battles are worth fighting, not for victory, but for what victory preserves. You fight with the courage of people who choose to build rather than destroy, to include rather than exclude, to remember rather than forget. And when the fighting is finished, when justice has been served, when threats have been neutralized, you return to the quiet work of living, loving, teaching, creating, preserving what matters most. In their apartment that evening, Brooklyn and Bruce sit together, reading letters from her grandfather, documents that saved not just a building, but a way of life outside their window. The neighborhood pulses with the rhythm of survival and celebration. Children play in streets made safe by courage. Families gather in homes protected by law and love. Elders share stories that will live in young hearts long after the storytellers are gone. This is what they fought for. This is what they preserved. This is what love looks like when everything else has been stripped away. The quiet dignity of ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because someone they love needs protection, simply because some things are worth the risk, simply because the question, what would you do, demands not just an answer, but action. And in that action, in that choice to stand rather than run, to fight rather than surrender, to love rather than fear, they discover that heroes aren't born from special powers or perfect courage. They're made from ordinary people who refuse to let the things they love be taken without a fight. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe.